Let's go in the talking room.
Jason Reitman has directed some of my favorite films of the last decade. Juno, Thank You for Smoking, Up in the Air, and Young Adult. With the luxury of being able to pick his projects one by one, Jason tells emotionally intense stories in smaller films. He joined me in the talking room to discuss the appeal of crafting complex, resonant characters, his approach to selecting projects, and growing up on the film sets of his father. Jason, thanks for coming on the talking room. I'm not exactly sure where to begin, so I want to begin where a lot of your interviews begin, which is talking about growing up with a dad being a filmmaker.
Look, I'm not confused. I know why I'm here. You're not interested in my Sundancey stuff. You have Ghostbusters questions. I got it. It's cool. We don't have to...
Actually, I am. You know, you said that you grew up on your dad's sets and that you saw filmmaking through those eyes as a job and not as some mythical thing that people do out in the ether. But I'm curious about the idea of being a Hollywood legacy, right? So you've seen a lot of stuff behind the scenes in Hollywood, and you've seen how children of prominent people in Hollywood turn out badly.
Legacy is a very strange word for Hollywood because it never quite is a legacy, right? I mean, if you're the son or daughter of someone in the film business, it usually you turn into an true Hollywood story, or just found in an alleyway somewhere.
Right. So you've seen how fame and notoriety can do terrible things to people, and I'm curious. It sounds from the way you've described it that your childhood was fairly normal and you went to your dad's job and saw him work and somehow just saw that as work, not as something mythological.
Right.
I'm curious if your parents worked hard to normalize the experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, they worked really hard to normalize it for me. I feel like to this day, I haven't really experienced that kind of dark side or party side of the film business. And it probably comes from the fact that my parents grew up in good homes and wanted to create a good home for my sisters and I. I was born up in Montreal, but I grew up in Los Angeles, and I was born around the time that my father's career started. I think I was 11 days old on the set of Animal House. So pre-Animal House, my father was producing these kind of odd Cronenberg films up in Canada. He was directing a few films, but they were strange. My dad directed a film called Cannibal Girls, and he directed a movie called Foxy Lady, and so I was born to two people who had not really achieved a ton of success yet.
Your mother was an actress.
My mother was an actress, and actually, apparently a fairly prominent French-Canadian actress at the time. She had a film that went to Cannes. I'll never forget, it was her birthday one year, and my uncle had found a long-lost videotape of one of her films and gave it to her for her birthday in front of the whole family. And the moment she saw it, she screamed and grabbed it and hid it, and that was the moment I realized, oh, my mom did a sex scene. But my mom had already kind of achieved some success before my father ever touched it, and there's a great newspaper clipping that we have at my parents' house with my mother and father at Cannes, and it says under the photo of them, Geneviève Deloire and friend, and that's how they refer to my dad. And my mom actually helped pay for one of my father's first films, and so I think my parents kind of grew comfortable with success as I was growing up.
But, I mean, you also grew up seeing your father go to great successes and lesser successes, as any career will go through. I mean, did you watch him handle that in a way that was instructive for you?
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about it. I mean, when it comes to that, my father's advice has always been just make more movies. He spent way too much time thinking about what movie should be the next movie. What should be the follow-up to a Ghostbusters? Or, what should be the follow-up to Dave? And he says there's no real good that can come of that. That you never know what's going to be a great success. You never know what's not going to connect. The film that you think is going to be huge ends up just like, meh. And then this little thing that you just didn't think much about, it just somehow kind of taps a vein. So you just have to keep working and not think too much about what is the life of this art going to be after I'm done with it.
That's a tough stance to hold in Hollywood, which is so success-oriented, right? Because the studio always wants you to think what is going to be the next thing.
Yeah, and you're judged so quickly by, whatever your last work is. I mean, it's a tricky beat, but if you can somehow get back to why you make movies in the first place and look historically at filmmakers, you look at some of your favorite filmmakers and you can look at the films that bookend their greatest success. Billy Wilder made, I think, kind of 1, 2, 3. It was either immediately before or after The Apartment, and you can watch those two films back to back and go, God, I mean, these tones could not be any more different. And The Apartment is simply a masterpiece on every level. And 1, 2, 3, I'm not a fan. You'll find people who like it, but whatever. It's just and it just shows. Artists have moments, and you just have to keep working.
At what point in your arc did you decide that filmmaking was going to be the thing you wanted to do? And was your dad encouraging, or was he try and tamp your enthusiasm or give you some advice?
It's funny. So I think I was a teenager at the moment that I realized, I will always live in my father's shadow, because I loved movies growing up. And I, like probably everyone in this room right now, had a Handycam and would make all kinds of little films, whether they were kind of like mini action films or adventure films. I remember, seeing Backdraft and building a cardboard, version of a factory and putting a camera and lighting it on fire, and just being dropped off the multiplex and seeing movie after movie. The only difference with me is I was a rich kid, so I actually bought tickets to all the films. I didn't sneak from theater to theater. And there was a moment where I realized, people really hate the children of famous people, and they have a very high chance of failure. And if I try to become a filmmaker, I'll either succeed in his shadow or fail on a very visible plane. And it was at that time that I went to college and I went pre-med, under the idea that no one ever questions why you become a doctor. That was the only reason. There was nothing altruistic about it. I would be I'm the last person you want to see.
But it runs a whole bunch of conversations off at the pass.
But yeah, no one's ever said, really, doctor? Why? And it's such a noble cause. And so I go to college, I go pre-med, and I'm doing horribly because I don't care about any of this stuff. And my father comes to visit me in school, and he takes me out to this diner. I remember, I have a menu from this diner. We sit down, and it was miserable. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I told him, I don't know. And I explained what I just explained to you. And he said, well, look, first of all, being scared really isn't a reason to do anything. But then he goes on to tell me a fantastic story. My grandparents, his parents, were Holocaust survivors who came to Canada with literally nothing, had to learn English. My grandfather had a dry cleaner and then a car wash. And at one point, my father, I guess, went to Quebec and found these sandwich shops that had submarine sandwiches, and they were very successful. And he goes back to Toronto and goes to my grandparents and says, you have to give me the money to open up one of these sandwich shops. We're going to make a fortune. They got lines going around the block. And my grandfather stops my father and says, look, I'm sure these sandwiches are very good. And I'm sure if I gave you the seed money, we could open up one of these places and we could make some money. But I don't think there's enough magic in it for you. You need to find something with magic in it. This from, a Jewish man from, Czechoslovakia who came to Canada with nothing. And at the time, and they had this car wash, tells my father, you need to find someone with magic. And my father goes to school on a music scholarship. He starts a film club. The film club leads to him making a short film and a feature film. And he goes on to becoming a great filmmaker. And my father says, look, there's no more noble a profession in the world than being a doctor. If you really wanted to be a doctor, your mother and I, we'd be over the moon for you. But I think you need to find something that has enough magic in it for you. I think you're a storyteller, and you have to stop being so scared. And it was literally on that advice. I came back to Los Angeles a week later. It was winter break. I go to USC. I go to the head of admissions, who had no time to see me. I walked her to her car, and on the way to her car, I was convincing her to let me into the school. I literally ended with, help me come home. And she bought that and totally let me into the school. I was an English major, and I started making short films. And my father became the first Jewish father in history to tell his son, don't be a doctor. Be a filmmaker.
So I remember being 15, 16, idolizing my dad, wanting to emulate his career, wanting to emulate the success I saw in him, and then spent a good portion of the remaining years between then and now excising the opinions I realized I was holding because they were his. Right?
Oh, like that's interesting.
Holding on to things that he said. And many of them are absolutely right. He said some wonderful things. But there's also some things that I realize I don't agree with, but I did because they were Dad's opinions.
You just want me to shit talk my dad?
No. I'm as a father, my kids are 16. You have an 8-year-old. I'm fascinated by what I got from my dad, both from him and on my own, that way in which you separate from the parents, and what I'm passing on to my kids, and then what they'll take and run with. That's different than I expect. You know?
Right. It's tricky. And obviously it's tricky as a father and son where we do the same thing for a living. And my dad's sense of story and my father's sense of business are both so strong. And I really just had to identify what my voice was. And I was very fortunate that at the time in the 90s, there was this film festival movement that was just swelling in America. You had all these cool directors that were coming out of Sundance. I mean, this is the moment where Quentin Tarantino arrives and PTA arrives and Wes Anderson and Sofia Coppola and Spike Jonze and Robert Rodriguez has that book. And it was just an exciting time to want to make movies. I would have to imagine it was like, you know, living in the kind of shadows of CBGBs and wanted to make punk music. It was just, this was a moment where the director was a badass. I mean, Quentin Tarantino was cool.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the moment before that where the director was that rock and roll. And so even though I had grown up in the studio system watching my father make these broad movies that appealed to the world, there was this whole world of storytellers that I idolized that went to film festivals, made films that were sometimes for a very small audience and
for very small budgets.
Yeah, and it was easy for me to go, that's what I want to be a part of. And frankly, if I try to be a part of that, I'll be kind of judged in that realm. It won't be, did you make a broad comedy that made $300 million? I can bring my thing to Sundance and people hate it. They'll just be like, yeah, that wasn't good. And if it works, it'll find its own life within the film festival system and then hopefully break out. And that's exactly what Thank You for Smoking was.
Right. So you made several short films before Thank You for Smoking.
Yeah.
And can you describe the process of sort of understanding this? I think of your films as being very physically oriented. Like as a viewer, I think of them like that. They're always placing me in a space where I feel like I can touch the paper or taste the food that the characters are eating. And I'm just wondering about the development of the language of the kind of storytelling you wanted to do.
I think it all comes down to a voice. And the first time I read the book, Thank You for Smoking, that's what it was. I read this book and I said, who is this? Who is Christopher Buckley? What is this voice? It seems to be articulating the things that I've felt but have never found the words for. And that's who I am, and that's who I want to be as a filmmaker. And that's when I read the script for Juno for the first time. I was like, who is this Diablo Cody? What is this voice? And I think that's what gets me excited about making a movie is, can I give this voice a life on screen that you can feel while watching a movie? And then, frankly, I feel, for me at least, the visual becomes ancillary. The visual becomes somehow a slave to that voice, and making sure nothing visually, whether it has to do with the rhythm of the film and the editing or the shooting of the film and the lens choice, or even what the characters are wearing, bumps away from the singularity of that voice.
Okay. And speaking of that, I'm continually astounded by your casting. And you told me that you have often written for the actors that you were lucky enough to get. And you started with one of my favorite actors, Aaron Eckhart. It's just like I can't see anyone else delivering that character. And Thank You for Smoking. Did you write the screenplay hoping that he would be your actor?
I mean, in full honesty, no. I think when I wrote it as the anti-Jerry Maguire. I always thought, and I love Jerry Maguire, but the thought was always, what if Jerry Maguire sold cigarettes? And I used to watch that opening of that movie. I mean, Jerry Maguire has one of the best openings in film history.
Agree.
You know, it has that perfect live version of Magic Bus that plays through the whole thing. The Cameron Crowe, I guess, apparently, he paired it together with like 8 different records that were better in different spots to get the vinyl off each one. Is amazing. And then the visual, he starts on the Earth and you go into the Earth, and that's us. Let's go a little closer. And the satellite flies by. And I watched it so many times. And Thank You for Smoking kind of opens in a similar way. This kind of affable, very handsome guy says, that's us. This is humanity. Only, you know, he's the guy who sells cigarettes. And I always thought, oh, it's Tom Cruise. So I wrote with the voice of Tom Cruise in mind. Tom Cruise did not want to do Thank You for Smoking, shocker. And strangely, it was owned by Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson owned Thank You for Smoking.
Right, he wanted to star in it at one point.
He was going to star in it, he was going to direct it, he had owned the rights for a while, and it had fallen apart, and I actually had to convince his company to hire me to write the draft, and then Thank You for Smoking was strangely paid for by the PayPal Mafia. So Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and David Sachs paid for Thank You for Smoking. If you look in the credits, those are all the executive producers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is far out.
Yeah, it's strange. We shot on Elon's plane.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a private plane scene. It was shot on Elon's plane.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, so you decide to make Thank You for Smoking, and you go through the process of convincing Mel Gibson's company to let you write it. Did you? I feel like I've seen this narrative a lot in your films, that you wrote the screenplays on spec, or there were other screenplays that existed and you just came in and wrote your own in order to gather the project around you?
Yeah, Thank You for Smoking was kind of a dead project where they had spent so much money that it was just drowning in its own debt, and it had become an impossible movie to make because they had spent so much money that it would kind of rival the budget of the film. And they had tried to make it into... like literally there was one script that was an action version of the movie. It was just absurd.
So I'm curious though about the idea of writing on spec, of taking the time to do that. At the same time, you're also trying to raise money to make it, right? Mm-hmm. That process, how long did that take for the first film versus Juno versus the second?
Thank You for Smoking took 5 years to make. Up in the Air, 7 years. Juno was surprisingly quick. Juno was a script that hit Hollywood and everyone immediately identified her voice as unique and interesting, and that as a makeable movie. And I actually didn't get hired the first time around on Juno. I threw my hat into the ring, and they did not even take a meeting with me, and they met with 40 other directors. And in the interim, they worked with the director for about a year. They parted ways, and at that point, Thank You for Smoking came out, did well, and all of a sudden, the idea of me directing was not so unpalatable, and I went in and fought with 3 other directors and got the job.
Now, that moment when Thank You for Smoking comes out, you probably got offered a lot of other jobs.
I mean, it's always been kind of weird because I think certain filmmakers or certain people just believe that you make a small movie in order to make big movies. I'm not knocking that at all. I want to make small movies. And that's kind of always been the goal. So I think it's kind of confusing after each one to go into meetings where they're like, all right, now here's your opportunity to go, you know.
Is it not tempting? Do they not wave giant budgets?
Not at all. I mean, look, the benefit, people wonder, what is the benefit of growing up, a kid in Hollywood, the child of parents who did really well? The benefit is I never think about the money. That's just not on the table for me. And that kind of purifies the process for me.
Right.
It may just sound gross what I just said, but it's just kind of the truth of my living situation is I grew up the son of someone who did really well. I grew up in Beverly Hills, and I make movies because I want to make great movies, and that's kind of it. And I've identified what kind of movies I want to make. They're not big movies, even though I love big movies. There's a moment where you have to realize who you are in every way.
Right.
I think there's a moment you look in the mirror one day and you go, that's who I am. No matter all the different ideas of who I was growing up, this is who I am. And now I can try to kind of change that or flex that a little. But at the end of the day, I know who I am as a filmmaker. I know what my voices. And for me to make a Jurassic movie is insincere.
Right.
It's offensive to the people who love those movies, including myself. So after Juno, I remember they offered me Justice League, for example.
Wow.
Right. And which is insane, first of all. It's like, right. Why would you trust me with Justice League? And second of all, okay, so there's a flattering moment. It's like, they offered me Justice League. Wow. And then I imagined myself on the set. And I'm walking up to Batman going, now remember, Batman, in the last scene, Superman really upset you about this, and that. You're feeling these feelings, and 3 scenes from now, you're going to blow up, and you're going to go do this, that. And it just made me laugh. The idea of me trying to get into the complex feelings of Batman and Superman and having this scene. And I obviously don't have the brain. I don't have the genetics that allowed Chris Nolan to make those brilliant movies. And you can kind of mourn that for a moment to go, okay, that's not who I am. And then somehow be grateful for the privilege of having the voice that I have and try to make those movies.
So do you gravitate in film history towards the Cassavetes, the Godards, the early Coppola,
No,
those
that's
smaller
the funny
films?
thing. I've never even seen a film by Cassavetes. Like I've seen way more, like I've seen Commando 3 dozen times. I have never seen a Cassavetes film. My film education is deplorable. I'm not a fussy guy when it comes to seeing movies. I've seen a lot of trashy movies and I've really loved it. And I'm probably way more excited about seeing some summer blockbusters this year than I am about, some smaller films. But that doesn't mean I don't know who I am as a filmmaker. And that's a tricky thing. I think anyone who goes to film school has this moment where they're like, I want to make a horror film and I want to make a sci-fi film and I'm going to make a romance. But if you think about your favorite filmmakers, they don't actually do that.
They're interested in something else.
They're interested in the voice that they have and the films that they make. And you think about Spielberg, or you think about Scorsese, or you think about Wes Anderson, or you think about PTA, they're not all over the map. Every once in a while, if they have a lot of success that allows them to kind of just taste something different, they do. But even as film fans, I think we think of it as selfish. When they go off and do something weird, we go, all right, I know you needed to go try doing that, but can you please go back and, I'm much more grateful that Spielberg made War of the Worlds than I am of him making Amistad. And there's people who will argue that Amistad is somehow a greater quality of film just because it's a drama, but I don't think so. When I watch War of the Worlds, particularly the first half of it, I watch a genius doing what he does better than any human being alive.
I totally agree.
Whereas Amistad, I'm like, you know what? There's 10 other directors who I would have been interested in their version of Amistad. I would have seen Ridley's Amistad. That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'd go see Fincher's Amistad, Mark Romanek's Amistad. I mean, there's probably,
Did you see when Soderbergh took the soundtrack off of Raiders?
Amazing. The black and white sound. Just brilliant. So if I hear Spielberg's doing a sci-fi film, that's a gift. That's a gift for all of us.
Yeah. How did you feel about, there was some commentary after Juno came out that it was somehow anti-abortion. Because it never got dealt with within the...
so funny because it was half the audience thought it was pro-life and half the audience thought it was pro-choice. In the same way that half the audience thought Thank You for Smoking was pro-cigarettes and half the audience thought it was anti-cigarettes.
or libertarian.
Yeah, both times I got invitations to speak at panels on both sides. Wow. So when Thank You for Smoking came out, I literally in the same year got invitations to speak at something for the Lung Association and something for, there was a libertarian candidate somewhere in the country. They were like, do you want to come speak at his thing? And then on Juno, a pro-choice and a pro-life thing. There was trying to remember what the examples were. On Juno, there was some pro-choice thing I got invited to, and then the movie won something called a Christopher Medal, which is a like a Christian award you can get with like it's like there's Joseph and baby Jesus on a medal, and it's a very strange thing as a Jew to have.
So your characters.
And by the way, that's when I know I succeeded.
Right.
That's
that you've,
the win.
You've hit on all these different levels.
I guess, sorry. If there is another continuity in my films, it's that I hate when filmmakers tell me how to feel. I hate it. I hate when it feels like dogma, when it feels like here's the lesson, here's the rule, and here's why you watch the movie. And I'm much happier when you walk away and you don't know. And Chris Buckley said the best satires are when he was talking about books at the time, or when the book is just a mirror. So this is fascinating to me because making a film is a tremendous effort. Even the smallest film is an army of people, and it's months and years of work and all these different disciplines coming together. How do you possibly shepherd such a thing and stay open to the idea that the interpretation can be open? Because, I guess because my goal is that the interpretation be open. I think it'd be much harder if I was hoping that there would only be one walkaway and one takeaway on the film. I mean, is there a point when you're planning when you think, I'm pigeonholing this scene and I need to open it up? That's a really great question. I wish I had an example. I was watching. So, before I watched Labor Day, I knew what the plot was, and so I started looking at that opening montage of the shots of suburbia, and I was thinking, this is an interesting montage because it's not the standard, and then he's fading faster than I would expect, and then I realized I feel kind of like a convict going through an unfamiliar neighborhood. Oh, that's cool. And I'm wondering, was that intentional? No. How can I say this without sounding stupid? I feel like I don't put as much thought as that into the film. I really work off my gut. It's funny. I've had many conversations before with people who love lyrics, and I am music, not lyrics. I've never listened to the lyrics of any song. People all the time tell me, "Oh, it's like that's what that song's about." I'm like, what? Someone recently told me that Lola was about a transvestite. I said, fuck off. Really? I thought that was about young love. I don't listen to lyrics, and I think I take a similar approach on my films. I'm not thinking about the literal meaning. I'm simply going off feel. There's a reason why I have a decision, and it's gut. And I would have never sat there and thought, oh, this will give the impression of what it's like for a convict to come through a neighborhood. My thought was, I want to establish this neighborhood. I want to establish a feel and a tone and a world. You probably just got out of your car at a mall and you just walked past a Foot Locker and you're entering a movie theater and your cell phone's in your pocket and there's all other stuff on your mind. Let's take 90 seconds and let's just be on some streets in a neighborhood. And let's hear a sprinkler, and let's hear some kids playing around. And we're not even going to play music. We're just going to play these kind of odd drone sounds, and you're going to feel the heat of a hot summer day. And now you're in the right place. Now let's start the movie. It's do you, for a scene like that, do you send out a second unit to do it, or do you take on the shooting? No, that was okay. So the way we shot that was I'm way too exacting. I'm way too controlling to let the second unit do that. I don't think I've ever had a second unit. So it was one more reason why you don't want me directing Jurassic Park. It'd take me 10 years. So there's these cars that I'm sure you've seen. It's called the Russian Arm or the Ultimate Arm, and it's a Porsche Cayenne. Yes. With an arm built up over the top. They're painted matte black. My cameraman covets this piece of equipment so much. Oh my God, they're bad. I've directed some car commercials. We use them, and they're amazing. And they have a stunt driver driving. They have the camera operator in the passenger seat, the arm operator in the trunk, focus puller sitting in the back seat to the right, directors on the left, and they can literally, they use them on all the Bond films, and they go 100 miles an hour, and the crane's flying around and capturing everything, and they go right next to the car, and they're just such expert drivers. And for the opening title sequence of Labor Day, we hired this team to drive at 25 miles an hour across the entire state of Massachusetts. So we started in the morning, and I was in the back seat, and I literally just had my iPhone out, and I'd be like, let's take a left turn here. And we just go down a little road and let's get some pretty trees and get some pretty birds. And, oh, that's kind of nice. And we just casually drove and they were just so bored out of their minds. I could feel their adrenaline needing to go somewhere. And it's like, no, go a little slower. I think that would be nice.
You know, I'll tell you, we buy lots of cars on Mythbusters and we wreck them.
I know. I'm always curious where you get all these cars from.
All
really?
of them Craigslist. And
do you tell them what you're about to do?
Yeah.
I have so many more questions for you. I am such a bigger fan of you than you are of me. You have no idea. Like, to this day, I watch Mythbusters every night before I go to sleep. I watched Mythbusters last night before I went to sleep. And I've watched episodes 3-4 times. I know what's going to happen, but there's something about your relationship with Jamie that is just very soothing to me, and I like to watch you guys explore things. And we were talking about Radiolab earlier, and something I love about that. I admire infinite curiosity, and it's sadly, I think that's a part of us that slowly dies so often. And to see it on your show and to see it in you in such an uncut form is honestly so hopeful. And I think it's probably why I go to sleep watching your show every night, because it's kind of the loveliest thing I can imagine.
Well, thank you.
No, I mean it.
Are there filmmakers whose work you would love to emulate but realize it's not your...
Oh, I mean, all of them. I mean, how about you? I mean, isn't it the same thing?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, do I, not watch, like the we were talking about Neil Blomkamp, do I not watch District 9 and go, wow, he's able to explore politics and humanity. He does it through sci-fi, but it's sci-fi that almost looks like a handheld mumblecore film. And there's all this naturalism built in. And I was like, God, I'd love to be able to do that. And at the same, do I fawn over Spike Jonze or fawn over Fincher or fawn over PTA or fawn over, Hal Ashby? Yeah.
Are there things you see in some of those films that you want to try in your films? I mean, I would imagine it's easy to actually get tied up sometimes in the technique.
I think anytime I, and I've seen this with other filmmakers, try to emulate another filmmaker, it feels false. It's the point in the concert where, the guitarist needs to do some weird ass solo song that doesn't fit with the rest of the concert. Right. And that's lovely, but would I like to shoot the lights out like David Fincher? Of course. Yeah. If I try to do David Fincher, it's going to look so amateurish and it'll feel, more importantly, so false that I have to kind of rescue myself from that.
So, Up in the Air, you said 7 years developing it?
Yeah.
Do you have several other projects on the burners juggling in the background in various stages of development?
So, I mean, look, if you are a fan of my first 4 films, then yes, I've been writing a script for the last 3-4 years that I'd like to shoot next year that will be a return to that kind of voice and style. I mean, one thing that happened is, I got divorced 5 years ago. And I think that had a real impact on the 2 movies that I made after that. I think they were less joyful. And this one is joyful. So
is that something you come to after the fact to realize?
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's only after, I mean, I don't know any filmmaker who's ever been able to kind of in the moment go, I am doing this and I am doing it for this reason. If they could do that.
I don't think it's possible.
And the film would probably turn out horrible if you knew. You have to not know. You have to just be kind of following a scent.
Do you watch your films years later?
Every once in a while. I can't watch Thank You for Smoking anymore. I see too many mistakes in that one. I'll catch a piece of Up in the Air, Juno on, or Young Adult on. I'll watch it for a little bit and go, all right, that worked. That less so. I haven't seen Men, Women, and Children or Labor Day yet. That'll probably happen in 2 years, is my guess.
And you see all the things you wanted to do. You see some things that are better than you thought they would be, some things that are worse? I mean,
the thing that I would say about Up in the Air is I wouldn't change it. And that's what I'm most proud of. When I look at the film, I'm like, that's how it's supposed to be. Yeah. I mean, I said what I wanted to say, whether you agree with it or not.
So there is one prop from your films that I covet and would love to have in my collection.
Really?
If you can help me.
I have a Ghostbusters gun at my house. I have a real Ghostbusters gun from
Oh my God,
set.
really?
I know. Yeah, I feel like when I die, I should just leave that. I think that's the appropriate. No one will care for it more.
It's true. It is totally true.
It's beat to shit because I played with it as a kid. I got it when I was 7 years old. No way. I'm so sorry. No, like when I was 7 years old, it was 1985, and every kid went as a Ghostbuster for Halloween, but I was the only one with the real fucking gun.
Oh my God. No, I was going to say it's the 10 million mile card.
Oh, I have to send you a photo of something. All right, I have in my home, I have a big framed object that has every card that was in his wallet. I am Ryan Bigham. I obsess over travel and if your product or company has a membership card, I am apt to join just to get that little piece of plastic. I am a fan.
Any reading about your films online yields a lot of people complaining that they're not sure what your voice actually is.
That's really funny.
And I find that kind of curious. I mean, I don't pretend to have a clear idea about what it is, but I do notice that across all your films, it seems to me pretty clear that you love all of your characters, even the ones who are venal. That they're all very realized.
I like questionable human beings. That's what I find interesting. I'm a bit contrarian, or a lot contrarian. And look, okay, here's the heroes of my movies. Head lobbyist for Big Tobacco, pregnant teenage girl, a guy who fires people for a living and also thinks that life would be better lived alone, a woman who's trying to break up a marriage, a convicted felon, and then the last one. I mean, it's a whole assortment of people doing atrocious shit. So I'm interested in the humanity of people who are deemed villainous. That's interesting to me. I'm less interested in heroizing heroes. It's fun to watch, I suppose, but for me, I'm interested in people's flaws. I'm interested in the humanity and flawed human beings. And I guess for me, that's the tonal line. And that continues to be. I think that hopefully is the continuity.
Well, I'm interested that you said in an interview that your dad gave you a perspective on Labor Day about saying it's actually the story of the boy.
Yeah.
That's something that hadn't occurred to you while making it or hadn't been that clear.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in film by film, you have this preternatural...
And that was my selfish movie, by the way.
That was your selfish movie?
Yeah, in the way that I just discussed, like filmmakers going off and doing something out of voice and being selfish. Labor Day is absolutely my selfish film where I had 4 films. It had all been successful in one way or other. And I got to do this drama that was completely outside of my voice. That was the shooting style, the pace of it, the music of it, the fact that it was like a timepiece. Every part of that was me wanting to try something.
Well, in preparation for this the most recent film of yours I saw, and I really loved it. But I also have this thing about it that I realize a lot of people don't like even probably describing the plot to other people.
Right.
Like it's almost that word of mouth of like, this doesn't sound good coming out of my mouth. Convict falls in love with the people he kidnaps.
Right.
But I found when I said about your movies having a real physicality, the moment when Kate Winslet tastes I don't even know what it is that he made for breakfast. When she tastes the biscuit, she tastes it and has this look across her face and realizes that this is a quality human. I found that incredibly moving. And I thought the whole movie felt sort of like that, these realizations of these damaged people seeing each other's quality.
No, look, I'm very proud of the filmmaking on Labor Day. I think it was a very hard film to make. It took a lot of work. There's a lot of detail in it. The shooting took a lot of work. I think it's a beautiful looking movie. But it was a really interesting educational moment for me as far as realizing I do have a voice and there's something that people expect from it. Coming off of 4 films where there's kind of, no matter what people on the internet have said, I think there's a continuity between them. And when I veered from that, there was a very clear response to that. That was interesting.
I was at a party recently talking to a film critic, and we bonded over the fact that we were some of the people we knew who absolutely loved young adult. And that film slayed me.
Thanks.
We watched it twice in a row. And one of the things I found most amazing was Charlize Theron's playing that character seemingly without any attempt at redemption. Like just playing the character fully without trying to win back the audience or something. I don't know. It seemed to me to be a natural thing to not want to play the character that hard.
Yeah, and I even had a kind of harder version of it where there was part of me that wanted to end. The best scene in that movie, it's one of my favorite scenes I've ever directed. It may be my favorite, is Charlize with Patton's, little sister, and they're sitting there in the breakfast room, and Charlize is damaged, and she's ready to change, and she's at the moment that in any normal film, the character changes and learns something, and she's right on the verge, and then the other girl says, "No, don't change. Just be yourself." She's like, "Oh, thank you for that." And then the other girl says, "Take me with you." And Charlize's response is, "No, you're good here." And walks out the door. It's the cuntiest thing. And I remember I really wanted to end the movie there. There was a part of me that was just like, and credits. But it was so cruel that no one would allow me. And finally, the movie was going to be on TBS. And when movies play on cable, they have to edit, little pieces here and there to get it down to time. And the studio sent me a bunch of suggestions of little things to take out, and I said no.
Cut the film there.
Just play the film as normal, and she's gonna say you're good here and step out of the room, and then you cut to credits, and they did, and that's how it appeared on TBS.
Did you get response for that?
I have no idea. I'm just happy that it happened.
Do you go to your are you interested in the audience response to the pre-screenings, the previews of?
Yeah, but not in a. The cards are not as important to me. You just feel it working or not working. I think that's kind of it.
Watching it with an audience.
Yeah, you just sit in the room and you just register. You don't even have to listen as much. You just kind of feel it when the movie's in a groove or not in a groove, and there's beats that last too long. So. I
was fascinated that I read an interview with David Cronenberg, and I think of him as a very challenging filmmaker.
Yeah.
But he said specifically he loves the previews and he loves reading the comments because he wants to make a movie that people want to see.
Cronenberg's a normal dude. It's the weirdest thing. I remember thinking, watching his films, oh man, this guy's going to be a maniac. And my dad had done these films with him early, so I was like, God, what was it like working with him? And then I met him, and he was just completely affable and lovely and normal. And I found much weirder filmmakers who have made very normal movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you found? Have you had an actor change your perception of a character while you were making the film with them?
That's a great question. Have I had an actor change my perception of the character? I remember Bill Macy on Thank You for Smoking being really smart and giving advice to me. I was like 25 at the time, and he gave me really smart advice on the character, because I think I was just beating up his character too much and not giving him a shot. And Bill told me, he's like, look, if you don't give him a shot, then it means nothing that your hero overcomes him. I was like, oh, you're absolutely right. And he came up with some really smart dialogue for his own character, and that was really helpful.
You frequently cast very, very big actors for your films, and I've read enough about directors to know that sometimes you can give a lot of information to your actors, and sometimes they don't want a lot of information.
Yeah.
And there can be a real push-pull there. And then also you can feel, Kevin Smith talks a lot about films getting away from him because of the actors that he's chosen. And I'm just, as you were saying earlier, it's impossible to know whether a film is going to be great or not. And once the process starts, it's a freight train.
Yeah.
You've been seem to be incredibly lucky with your casting.
I've been really lucky. I've been really lucky to have actors who were willing to be so generous, and for whatever reason, their voices were kind of perfect matches to the roles. I've written a lot of movies for specific actors. Because of that, there's a certain kind of tailored element to it. But part of my job is just learning how to be a good manipulator. And sometimes that, means saying nothing, and sometimes that means saying a whole bunch. Over the course of the films, I've learned to relax a lot more. I think with my first film, I was probably just kind of strangling each actor into position. And with each ensuing film, I've learned to just breathe more and see what they bring and adjust where I need to. No matter what kind of filmmaker you are, your job is just to watch it and feel if it feels truthful. That's the best advice my father actually ever gave me. He said, look, remember, it's not your job to be funny. It's not your job to be dramatic. When you're on set, don't worry about those things, because your barometer for comedy will never be as good as your barometer for truth. So when you're watching, just ask yourself, do you believe it? Is this honest? If not, why? That's your job. You chose your script for a reason. You chose your actors for a reason. You've made all these choices. Now you're on set. Would someone actually walk in that way? Would they actually say that? Would they say it in that way? Would they sit down? Would they stand up when they said it?
Right.
What feels like bullshit? Because your job is to identify what feels false and find a way to make it feel truthful. That is it.
I read somewhere that Sidney Lumet would have a video tap on his sets, but he would never look at them during takes. Mm-hmm. That he would close his eyes and listen to the scene being played. Mm-hmm. And he'd know if it worked just by that.
I know. It's interesting. The sound thing is really interesting. I know there's a few directors who do that, and I actually believe in that. Strangely, I feel like I'm of a generation that grew up watching television so much that my sense of what is true on a screen is now strong or stronger than my sense of truth in real life. So I do watch the monitor more because I feel like I've been watching a monitor of some kind for all my life, and I know what feels honest on it. Is
there sometimes there's a take you're sure is the take you'll use in the film on set that turns out not? You choose another one? And
certain filmmakers have amazing memories. I'm the opposite. I have an atrocious memory, and because of that, I get to editing, which is my favorite process, as though some other asshole shot the film, and now I'm watching the footage going, oh God, why did he do that? And what was he thinking? And sometimes I'll be like, I remember there was this one great take, and then of course I'll watch it and go, oh no, that's not it. I mean, another great thing my father taught me is, you can't stranglehold your film. Your film is going to reveal themselves to you. In that way, your film is your child as well. You can try to shape your child into whatever you want, but at a certain point, your child is going to say, this is who I am. Right. And your film is going to tell that. There's going to be a moment where your film goes, this is who I am, and then you can either acknowledge that or not.
Does it do that in multiple phases? Like it does that once in the planning phase, once in the shooting phase, once in the edit phase?
Absolutely. And no matter what reason you decided to make the movie, and no matter how important that one scene or shot or moment is, when your movie starts telling you, hey, this is who I am, and that shot doesn't belong anymore, you have to learn to say, okay, no matter how much I loved that shot, my movie has told me it doesn't belong anymore. It's just not in the same language as the film. And
like Cameron Crowe's removing the Stairway to Heaven scene from Almost Famous.
Tell me what this is. I don't know.
Okay, so it was in every draft of what he said were 50 drafts of that script.
Really?
There's a scene in which Patrick Fugit plays Stairway to Heaven for his mom, Frances McDormand, and in the film, they listen to it in real time, and the camera's just on the two of them listening to the song in real time for the entirety.
That's it. Yeah.
And Cameron Crowe's like, this was my favorite scene. It was the soul of the movie. It's the one scene, if you'd asked me at the beginning, would make it to the end. And when he got into the edit suite, he realized this doesn't work. It's the wrong scene for the film.
And that takes incredible maturity, because you see all the time in a movie, there's a scene where a director, and you're like, why didn't you listen to your movie?
Right.
Why were you so stubborn? And my father beat that out of me really early. Not physically, but he was tough on me. I mean,
in terms of advice, in terms of
he took a position.
Feedback?
He's let me know this later, but he took a position when I was a teenager and started to write. He said, I made the choice that I was going to treat you like a professional screenwriter, and I'm going to be just as hard on you. And I'm not going to let you think that something's good when it's not. And I'm going to tell you when it's wrong and when you have more work to do. And he taught me to be ruthless from day one with my own work.
About killing your darlings.
Oh my God! I mean, killing them all. Screw the darlings. I mean, it's just it's Dog Day afternoon. Because of that, I learned to just get rid of stuff quickly at all stages. My version of that was a dream sequence in Up in the Air, which I was so proud of, and we went all the way to shooting it, and it was a dream sequence that George has as an astronaut, and he wakes up, he's in this dream, and he's walking through an airport dressed in a full astronaut costume. You would have loved it.
I would have loved it. If you need one again, you can call me.
I appreciate that. He's like with his rollaway walking through the airport, walking outside, getting into a taxi, being dropped off at home, looking up at his apartment, floating up past his apartment up into the sky until he's in space, and he's looking over the entire city of Omaha, contemplating his existence, and then there's a flight attendant floating next to him. It says, "Mr. Bingham," and he goes, "What?" And then, boom, we're back in the airplane, and he wakes up, and he's the last person on the plane. He's slept, and everyone's already left. And we shot the whole thing, cut it together to beautiful music, and it's on the DVD. You can see it. I'm very proud of it as a sequence, but that was one where this movie was really working, and the audience in the test screen would be like, "Why is he an astronaut?" Just like across the board, just like what is that? That as a filmmaker, I talked about learning what your own voice is. Every time I've tried to do something even slightly surreal, it has felt so false. It's like learning your body type and realizing you just shouldn't wear, tight sweaters or wherever. And like those are the tight sweaters of my movies. And every time I've tried to do something even slightly surreal, and it's like.
But you keep trying, so I'm wondering if there's a totally surreal film in your future.
I think that the part of me that keeps trying is the part of anyone that always believes they can be someone that they're not. It's the time that you try cowboy boots, or it's the time, you try, driving a thing or whatever. It's like, I could be cool like that, or I could do this. And, you can either lie to yourself or suddenly go, this is who I am, and I should just be kind of happy with who I am.
Do you have an interest in the longer format that television affords right now? I mean, you watch a lot of television.
Yeah.
So you're seeing things like Breaking Bad, and
certainly
you mentioned Peaky Blinders.
I just tried it for the first time. I just made this show for Hulu.
Right.
I directed the first couple episodes. It wasn't my creation, but I was involved. I was in the writer's room all the time. It's really interesting. I'm not sure at the end of the day if it's for me in the long run, if I want to create shows for television. I think of myself as a filmmaker, but I don't know. I mean, I may be forced into making big movies. You may see my Jurassic movie yet.
Well,
It'd be horrible, just dinosaurs talking about shit.
David Fincher said something really great about television, interviewing David Chase at the Directors Guild a couple of years ago. He said that what he liked about television, the longer format, was within a television series, you had the time to let a character contradict themselves. And within a film, true. You didn't.
That's great, yeah.
So I wonder what it was like to watch characters develop over the arc of the Hulu series you were working on. Like, is it a totally different method of thinking about characters?
Yeah, in that I don't normally think about character. I've always thought of the film as a manipulation device. I think a movie as leading to one thing. I want to punch you in the gut in a very specific way at one specific time towards the end of the film and send you back into the world thinking about that and see how that changes the rest of your day. Huh. That for me is what a film is, at least as far as my construction goes. So I don't have that in television. In television, there is no punch in the gut because you're just going to go to the next episode and it never ends. Television doesn't end. Film ends. And I like the ending. I like the magic trick. I like, a magic trick is all about the reveal, the moment, or is there a double reveal? And film is an emotional magic trick. Up in the air. I'm going to take you on this ride and make you think you're watching because of this reason. You're going to get involved because this reason, and then he's going to get to Vera's door, and now I fucking gotcha.
Oh, the look on her face just kills me.
And that's it. And now you're going to walk away going, okay, why did that make me feel this way? And what does that say about what do I really want? Do I want this? Do I want that? He was making kind of an interesting point for this. And there's a continuity between my films. I think on that note, I'm going to take you down this road, and then I'm going to suddenly cut over here, and how's that going to make you feel? And I can't do that in TV.
I particularly love the other moment that I think of when I think of Up in the Air is Anna Kendrick just what seems like spontaneously bursting into tears at the hollowness of George Clooney's existence.
That was a really fun moment. It's funny because Anna really trusted me through that entire shoot. And I had seen her in Rocket Science, and I'd written the role for her. And she was just wonderful and really started to kind of love her character and take care of her character. And when I was like, all right, you're going to break down wailing in this hotel lobby, and it's going to be gross and cheesy and embarrassing. And she, for the first time, put up a stand. I was like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that to her. And I had to kind of take her aside into another room. And I said, you're going to cry like this. And I just started like embarrassingly just like wail in front of her. And she just gave me this hard look. I was like, all right. And she went out and she did it. And she did it wonderfully. And then it turned into this lovely moment, because it's a moment where this girl who holds on to control so much finally lets go.
Is there, in that, trying to create that magic trick, is there one of your films or a couple of moments where you achieved it to such a degree you think, I'm just going to have to not to try to get to that again? Like you've knocked it out of the park, and then the next time...
I don't think that much of myself. No,
I've had a moment, like I do public speaking, and I had a moment a few years ago at an event where I thought about the speech for weeks, and then I wrote it the night before, and it was one of these perfect confluences.
Right.
With the right audience, the right sentiment, the right delivery, and when I walked off the stage, I just thought, you're going to have to realize that was unique, and it's not going to happen necessarily
it. You just landed
again.
it. I mean, look, I think I've made my best movie. Up in the Air, that's the movie I was born to make. I made it, and from here, I'm going to continuously try to find things to say, but Up in the Air represented everything I had learned and felt up until that moment in my life. That was, I made it when I was 30, and it was that's 30 years of experience put into one movie. I got to speak about a bunch of different things that meant a lot to me. And I'm sure if you had asked me a year later, I wouldn't have said it. But by now, I feel pretty comfortable with the fact that that's the one. And from here on in, I'm just going to try to tell good stories and explore what I'm feeling.
I think that's as good a place to finish as any. Dude, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.